Imagine a world where the air is thick with the cries of revolution, where the streets of Paris pulse with the feverish energy of change, and where the very fabric of society is being torn apart and rewoven before your eyes. In a time when the few lived in opulence while the many starved, the call for liberty, equality, and fraternity ignited a fire that would consume a nation and echoed through the centuries. This is not just a story of kings and queens, but of ordinary men and women who dared to dream of a better world. From the storming of the Bastille to the rise of Napoleon, the French Revolution reshaped the destiny of an entire continent. Welcome to Inside of Tales, where today we journey back to one of the most tumultuous and transformative periods in history, French Revolution. The French Revolution marked a turning point in world history, starting in 1789 and concluding in the late 1790s with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. During this period, French citizens drastically reshaped their political landscape, dismantling age-old institutions like monarchy and the feudal system. This upheaval was fueled by widespread dissatisfaction with the French aristocracy and the economic policy of King Louis XVI, who was ultimately executed by guillotine along with his wife Marie Antoinette. Despite descending into a bloody period known as the Reign of Terror, the French Revolution played a key role in shaping modern democracies, highlighting the formidable power of the people's will. Causes of the French Revolution. As the 18th century came to a close, France was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy due to its expansive involvement in the American Revolution and the lavish spending of King Louis XVI. The royal treasury was nearly empty, and the series of poor harvest, drought, cattle disease, and soaring bread prices had sparked widespread unrest among peasant and the urban poor. Desperation and resentment towards a regime that imposed heavy taxes without providing relief led to riot, looting, and strikes. In the fall of 1786, Controller General Charles Alexander de Calonne proposed a financial reform package that included a universal land tax, eliminating the tax exemptions enjoyed by the aristocracy. States General, to gain support for these reforms and prevent an escalating aristocratic revolt, King Louis XVI called for a meeting of the States General, an assembly representing France's clergy, nobility, and middle class. For the first time since 1614, the assembly was set for May 5, 1789. In the lead-up, delegates from each state in every locality were tasked with compiling list of grievances to present to the king. By 1789, France's population had changed significantly since 1614. The third estate, composed of non-aristocratic middle-class citizens, now made up 98% of the population, yet they could still be outvoted by the clergy and nobility. As the May 5 meeting approached, the third estate began relying for equal representation and the elimination of the noble veto. They wanted votes to be counted by head, not by status. While all three states sought fiscal and judicial reforms, a more representative government, the nobility was particularly resistant to giving up the privileges they had long enjoyed under the old system. Tennis court oath. By the time the States General convened in Versailles, the debate over its voting process and escalated into open hostility among the three states, overshadowing the original purpose of the meeting and undermining the authority of King Louis. On June 17, with discussion at a standstill, the third estate met separately and declared themselves the National Assembly. 3 days later, they gathered in a nearby indoor tennis court and took the tennis court oath, pledging not to be disbanded until they had achieved constitutional reform. Within a week, most of the clergy deputies and 47 liberal nobles joined them, and on June 27, Louis XVI reluctantly merged all three states into the new National Assembly. The Bastille. On June 12, as the National Assembly, later called the National Constituent Assembly, continued its work on a constitution at Versailles, fear and violence gripped the capital. While the Parisians were excited about the collapse of the royal authority, panic set in as rumor of imminent military coup spread. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 14 when the rioters stormed the Bastille fortress to secure gunpowder and weapons, a moment now celebrated as the start of the French Revolution. Revolutionary fervor and widespread hysteria quickly engulfed the nation. In response to years of exploitation, peasants began looting and burning the homes of tax collectors, landlords, and the aristocracy. The period, known as the Great Fear, escalated the fight of nobles from France and spurred the National Constituent Assembly to abolish feudalism on August 4, 1789, singing what historian Georges Lefebvre later called the death certificate of the old order. Thermidorian reaction. The death of Robespierre marked the start of the Thermidorian reaction, a period where the French people rebelled against the excess of the Reign of Terror. On August 22, 1795, the National Convention, now dominated by Girondins who had survived the Reign of Terror, approved a new constitution establishing France's first biochemical legislature. Executive power was placed in the hands of a 5-member directory appointed by Parliament. Although Royalists and Jacobins protested the new regime, they were quickly suppressed by the army, which was now led by a young and successful general named Napoleon Bonaparte. French Revolution ends. Napoleon's rise. The director's 4 years in power were marked by financial crisis, widespread discontent, insufficiency, and significant political corruption. By the late 1790s, the directors depended almost entirely on the military to maintain their authority and had relinquished much of their power to the generals in the field. On November 9, 1799, with frustration at their leadership at its peak, Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat, abolishing the directory and appointing himself as France's first consul. This event signaled the end of the French Revolution and the beginning of the Napoleonic era, during which France would dominate much of continental Europe. In conclusion, the French Revolution was a pivotal period that reshaped not just France, but the entire world. It demonstrated the power of the people to challenge and transform their society. From the fall of the monarchy to the rise of Napoleon, these events laid the foundation for modern democracies. Thanks for joining us on Insight of Tales. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more captivating stories from the past. And ministers. Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizens. In the late August, the Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a statement of democratic principles influenced by Enlightenment thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This document outlined the Assembly's commitment to replacing the ancient regime with a system based on equal opportunity, freedom of speech, popular sovereignty, and representative government. Drafting a formal constitution proved to be a significant challenge for the National Constituent Assembly, which also had to function as a legislative during difficult economic times. For months, its members grappled with fundamental questions about France's new political landscape. Who would be responsible for electing delegates? Would the clergy owe allegiance to the Roman Catholic Church or the French government? And perhaps most crucially, how much power would the king retain, especially after his failed attempt to flee the country in June 1791, which further damaged his public image. Adopted on September 3, 1791, France's first written constitution echoed the more moderate voices in the Assembly, establishing a constitutional monarchy in which the king enjoyed royal veto power and the ability to appoint. This compromise did not sit well with influential radicals like Maximilien de Robespierre, Camille Desmoulins, and Georges Danton, who began trumping up popular support for a more republican form of government and for the trial of Louis XVI. In April 1792, the newly elected Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria and Prussia, believing that French immigrants were forming counter-revolutionary alliances there. They also aimed to spread their revolutionary ideas across Europe through welfare. Domestically, the political crisis took a dramatic turn on August 10, 1792, when a group of insurgents led by the extremist Jacobins attacked by the royal residence in Paris and arrested the king. The next month, where Parisians insurrectionist masquerade handed up alleged counter-revolutionaries, the Legislative Assembly was replaced by the National Convention. This new body abolished the monarchy and established the French Republic. On January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine for high treason and crimes against the state, and his wife Marie Antoinette faced the same fate 9 months later. Reign of Terror. After the king's execution, the French Revolution entered its most violent and chaotic phase due to wars with various European powers and deep divisions with the National Convention. In June 1793, the Jacobins took control of the National Convention from the more moderate Girondins and implemented a series of radical measures, including creating a new calendar and attempting to eradicate Christianity. They also initiated the bloody Reign of Terror, a 10-month period during which thousands of suspected enemies of the revolution were guilloinated. Many of these executions were ordered by Robespierre, who led the harsh Committee of Public Safety until his own execution on July 28, 1794.